Dr. Ilara Voss, one of Earth's leading xenobiologists, adjusted her scanner as she approached the docking bay of the United Planetary Alliance's flagship, the Resolute. She was there to meet Ambassador Ziana, an alien diplomat from the mysterious and highly advanced Keylorian species. This was not Ilara's first time working with extraterrestrial beings, but her excitement was tempered by the Keylorians' secretive nature and their reputedly strange customs. As the airlock hissed open, Ziana emerged, a figure of sleek elegance with luminescent blue skin and eyes that seemed to shimmer like distant stars. Standing at nearly 7 feet tall, she moved with an ethereal grace that made her appear almost weightless. Her long, flowing robes seemed to ripple with a life of their own, catching the light in ways that defied physics. Ziana extended a slender hand towards Ilara, her expression inscrutable. "Dr. Voss." Ziana's voice was soft yet resonant, carrying a melodic quality that made each word sound like a note in a song. "It is an honor to meet you. I have studied your work extensively." Ilara smiled, accepting the handshake. "Ambassador Ziana, the honor is mine. Your species' advancements in bioengineering are extraordinary. I'm eager to learn from you." Ziana's gaze lingered on Ilara, a flicker of something inscrutable passing over her features. "The eagerness of humans always fascinates us. Your species' curiosity is both a gift and a danger." Ilara nodded, accustomed to the alien perception of humans as reckless explorers. "Curiosity drives progress, doesn't it?" Ziana tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as if scrutinizing Ilara for hidden motives. "Indeed, though sometimes it leads to unexpected discoveries." The two walked towards the central lab, exchanging insights about their respective species. Ziana's initial aloofness began to melt away as she revealed snippets of Keylorian history and their interest in forming stronger bonds with humanity. Ilara sensed that beneath Ziana's composed exterior was a genuine curiosity about humans, mirrored in Ilara's own fascination with the Keylorians. Inside the lab, Ziana's demeanor shifted. She seemed almost nervous, her luminous eyes darting between the equipment and Ilara. "Dr. Voss, there is a matter I wish to explore," discreetly. Ilara raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Ziana hesitated, as if weighing her next words carefully. "Your males, their anatomy differs significantly from ours, correct?" Ilara blinked, surprised by the directness of the question. "Yes, in several ways. Human males and females have distinct anatomical differences." Ziana's eyes seemed to glow brighter. "I wish to conduct an examination. For scientific purposes, naturally. Our records on human male anatomy are incomplete, and I believe it could aid in our diplomatic understanding." Ilara considered this, recognizing the potential for mutual learning. "I can arrange that. We have male volunteers on board who are familiar with interspecies research protocols." Ziana's eyes flickered, a strange intensity behind them. "No volunteers," she said firmly. "I need to understand the specifics myself. I must experience it firsthand." Ilara hesitated. "That's highly unusual, Ambassador. We typically rely on non-invasive methods for such studies." Ziana's expression softened slightly, almost pleading. "Please, Dr. Voss, this knowledge is crucial for our mission. There are elements of human physiology we must understand deeply, beyond mere observation." Ilara finally nodded, sensing the weight of Ziana's request. "I'll see what I can do, but we must proceed with utmost care and respect for boundaries. I'll set up a controlled session, with strict monitoring." Ziana inclined her head. "Thank you, Dr. Voss. I assure you, my intentions are purely scientific." As they parted ways, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Ziana's request than she let on. What exactly did the Keylorian ambassador hope to discover? And why the urgency? Little did Ilara know, this was only the beginning of an interstellar intrigue that would test the limits of human and alien diplomacy, with consequences that neither species could foresee. Ilara watched Ziana's retreating figure, her mind racing with questions. The ambassador's request was certainly out of the ordinary, even by the flexible standards of interspecies interactions. As Ilara made her way to her quarters, she couldn't help but ponder the implications. The Kilorians were famously secretive, and Ziana's sudden interest in human male anatomy seemed to deviate from their usual diplomatic approach. Back in her quarters, Ilara accessed her personal console, linking to the ship's restricted database. She combed through every available report on Kilorian physiology and cultural practices, hoping to find some context for Ziana's peculiar request. Most of the information was frustratingly vague, filled with gaps that only heightened her suspicion. Kilorians were known for their biotechnological prowess, but their exact motives often remained a mystery. Ilara tapped her communicator, reaching out to Commander Jackson Marlowe, the ship's security chief and a trusted confidant. Jackson was a seasoned officer, known for his keen instincts and unwavering dedication to the crew's safety. "Commander Marlowe, I need your assistance with a delicate matter," Ilara began, her tone carefully neutral. Jackson's image appeared on the screen, his expression alert. "Of course, Dr. Voss. What's going on?" Ilara briefed him on her meeting with Ziana, omitting none of the details about the ambassador's unusual request. Jackson listened intently, his brow furrowing as she spoke. "That's unexpected," Jackson said after a moment. "Kilorians aren't exactly known for their transparency, but this seems like a step beyond." Ilara nodded. "Exactly. I can't shake the feeling that there's more at play here." Ziana was insistent, almost desperate. Jackson leaned back, considering the situation. "We can't afford any diplomatic incidents, but we also need to be cautious. I'll have a word with Captain Reyes. In the meantime, if you go through with this, make sure you have full oversight. We can't allow any unauthorized procedures." "Agreed," Ilara said. "I'll draft a proposal for a monitored examination, strictly by the book. No surprises." "Good. I'll coordinate with medical and security teams to ensure everything's under control," Jackson replied. "And Ilara, watch your back. The Kilorians might be allies, but they play by their own rules." Ilara ended the call, her resolve firm. She spent the next few hours crafting a detailed plan for the examination, incorporating every safeguard she could think of. When she finally sent the proposal to Ziana, she included strict conditions, full observation, consent forms, and limits on what could be done during the session. The next day, Ilara stood in the sterile confines of the medical bay, surrounded by a small team of specialists. Monitors hummed softly, displaying vital statistics and data streams. Ziana arrived promptly, her composure immaculate, though Ilara noted the faintest hint of tension in her movements. "Ambassador, thank you for your patience," Ilara greeted, gesturing towards the examination area. "We've prepared everything according to protocol. You'll have access to the data you requested, but all interactions will be monitored." Ziana nodded, her gaze sweeping the room with an almost predatory intensity. "I appreciate your diligence, Dr. Voss. I understand the need for caution." Ilara introduced Lieutenant Mark Hadley, a seasoned crew member who had volunteered for the examination. He greeted Ziana with a polite nod, his demeanor professional despite the unusual circumstances. Ilara watched closely as the session began, Ziana's eyes studying Hadley with a focus that bordered on obsessive. The examination proceeded smoothly at first, with Ziana taking scans and asking detailed questions about human physiology. However, as the session progressed, Ilara noticed Ziana's probing becoming increasingly personal, delving into areas that went beyond the agreed scope. "Ambassador, we need to stay within the parameters we discussed," Ilara interjected gently, but firmly. Ziana paused, her expression unreadable. "Of course, Dr. Voss. My apologies if I overstepped." Ilara nodded, though unease gnawed at her. She exchanged a brief look with Jackson, who was monitoring from a nearby station. He gave a subtle nod, indicating that he was ready to step in if necessary. As the session concluded, Ziana thanked Lieutenant Hadley, and turned to Ilara. "Your cooperation has been invaluable, Dr. Voss. I believe this will greatly enhance our understanding of human dynamics." Ilara forced a smile, but she couldn't dismiss the nagging suspicion that Ziana's motives were not as transparent as she claimed. As the ambassador left, Ilara quickly ran a diagnostic on the examination logs, ensuring that nothing had been tampered with. Everything appeared normal, but Ilara's instincts told her to dig deeper. That evening, Ilara reviewed the examination footage, analyzing every detail. Something Ziana had said replayed in her mind. There are elements of human physiology we must understand deeply, beyond mere observation. The phrase echoed with a disquieting resonance. Suddenly, an anomaly caught her attention. A brief but distinct flicker in the data stream, a hidden transmission embedded within the scans. Ilara's pulse quickened as she isolated the signal, tracing its source. To her shock, it wasn't routed through the ship's main network, but directed towards an unregistered frequency. Ilara's breath caught. Ziana had been transmitting information off-ship, bypassing all standard communication protocols. The implications were staggering. Was this a breach of trust, or something far more sinister? Without hesitation, Ilara alerted Jackson and the captain. They needed to act fast, before whatever Ziana was orchestrating could unfold. As alarms blared throughout the Resolute, Ilara realized that the ambassador's true intentions were far from diplomatic. This was no mere scientific inquiry. It was espionage of the highest order, and humanity's future could very well hang in the balance. The Resolute's command deck was a flurry of activity as Ilara, Jackson, and Captain Rice convened in the war room. The atmosphere was tense, the implications of Ziana's unauthorized transmission hanging heavily over the gathered officers. Captain Rice, a seasoned leader with a reputation for decisive action, leaned over the tactical display, eyes sharp and unyielding. "We've locked down all external communications and initiated a full ship-wide sweep. Security teams are on high alert, but we need to get to the bottom of this, and fast." Jackson nodded, his expression grim. "We can't afford to let this slip through the cracks. If the Calorians are conducting espionage, it could compromise not just the Resolute, but the entire United Planetary Alliance." Ilara felt a pang of responsibility. She had vouched for the examination, trusting Ziana's diplomatic overtures. Now it seemed that trust had been a grave miscalculation. "We need to confront Ziana directly, but carefully. If she's part of a larger conspiracy, we can't let her know we're onto her just yet." Reyes agreed. "We'll play along for now, but I want surveillance on every move she makes. Dr. Voss, Jackson, you're with me. Let's find out what exactly the Calorians are after." The trio moved swiftly to the diplomatic suite where Ziana was staying. As they entered, they found the ambassador calmly meditating, her eyes closed and hands resting in her lap. She looked up as they approached, her serene expression unruffled by their sudden intrusion. "Ambassador Ziana," Reyes began, his tone cordial but edged with authority. "We need to discuss the nature of your examination and some irregularities we've discovered." Ziana's gaze flickered, but she maintained her composure. "Captain, Dr. Voss, Commander Marlowe, to what do I owe the pleasure? I trust the examination was enlightening." "It was educational," Ilara replied, carefully measuring her words. "But we found something unexpected. Transmission originating from your equipment during the session. It wasn't routed through standard channels." Ziana's serene mask faltered for the briefest moment, a flicker of surprise flashing in her luminous eyes. "A transmission. I assure you, I have not violated any of our agreements. There must be a mistake." Ray stepped forward, unyielding. "Our systems don't make mistakes, Ambassador. We have evidence of an unauthorized data stream sent off-ship, and it originated from your equipment. I need you to explain this now." Ziana's expression hardened, a subtle but unmistakable shift in her demeanor. "Captain, I respect your protocols, but I am here under the auspices of the Calorian High Council. I have diplomatic immunity, and you have no authority to detain or interrogate me without cause." Jackson crossed his arms, his voice steady. "We're not detaining you, Ambassador, but we are well within our rights to investigate potential breaches of our security. Your actions have raised serious concerns, and we need answers." Ziana stood, her height and presence imposing even in the confined space. "You misunderstand my intentions. The data I transmitted was purely for academic purposes, a cultural exchange. The Calorian High Council authorized this as part of our diplomatic mission." Ilara stepped forward, her voice firm but conciliatory. "Ambassador, we want to believe you, but the transmission was encrypted, and the frequency is not one used for standard diplomatic communications. This looks like espionage." Ziana's eyes narrowed, the first real hint of defiance breaking through her calm exterior. "You humans, and your endless suspicion. Always assuming the worst. If my actions have caused alarm, I will explain them to my superiors, but I am not answerable to you." Captain Rice exchanged a glance with Jackson and Ilara, then spoke with finality. "Until we verify the nature of this transmission, you're restricted to your quarters, Ambassador. We'll handle this according to our protocols, and you'll have the opportunity to present your case." Ziana's expression was unreadable, her gaze shifting between the officers. "Very well, Captain. But understand this. You are meddling in matters beyond your comprehension. The Calorians do not take kindly to such interference." With that, she turned her back on them, retreating to the inner chamber of her quarters. The door slid shut with a soft hiss, leaving the officers standing in a charged silence. As they left the suite, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of Ziana's true motives. The ambassador's defiance hinted at something far more complex than a simple breach of protocol. Back in the command center, Ilara and Jackson pored over the data logs, trying to piece together the puzzle. Suddenly, a new alert flashed on the screen. A secondary transmission had been intercepted, this time aimed at a Calorian vessel on the edge of the system. The message was heavily encrypted, but its contents were unmistakable. Detailed schematics of human DNA, alongside behavioral data and tactical vulnerabilities of the Resolute. Ilara's heart pounded. This wasn't just espionage. It was a prelude to something far more dangerous. The Calorians were gathering intelligence on a scale that suggested preparation for a potential conflict. They had been studying humans, not as allies, but as potential adversaries. Jackson slammed his fist on the console. "We've been played. This was never about diplomacy. It's reconnaissance. They're preparing for a confrontation." Captain Rice ordered an immediate lockdown and mobilized the ship's defenses. "We need to get this intel back to UPA Command. The Calorians have crossed a line, and we're sitting on a powder keg. Dr. Voss, Commander Marlowe, I need you to dig deeper. Find out everything we can about their endgame." As the Resolute went on high alert, Ilara realized the full gravity of their situation. The Calorian mission was not an olive branch, but a covert operation, and the fate of human-Calorian relations now hung in the balance. Ilara and her team had to act quickly, or risk plunging their species into an interstellar conflict that could change the course of history. The Resolute's emergency lights bathed the corridors in a pulsing red glow as the ship remained on high alert. Security personnel moved swiftly to key positions, and the bridge was abuzz with the urgency of preparations. Ilara, Jackson, and Captain Rice had convened in the ship's Strategic Operations Center, a high-tech hub of monitors and tactical displays showing every corner of the Resolute and the surrounding space. "We need a strategy," Captain Rice said, pacing in front of the main display. "If the Calorians are indeed preparing for a conflict, we have to alert UPA Command immediately. But we also can't risk tipping our hand before we understand the full scope of their plans." Ilara glanced at the intercepted data logs, her mind racing through the implications. "They've been gathering information on our species for who knows how long. If this is a precursor to hostilities, we need to find a way to counteract it. Perhaps even turn it to our advantage." Jackson looked up from his terminal, his expression tight with concentration. I've initiated deeper scans on Ziana's equipment, but we're dealing with advanced Kilorian encryption. It's going to take time to break through, and we don't have much of it. If they decide to act, we could be facing an incursion. Reyes turned to Ilara, his tone urgent. Dr. Voss, you've interacted with Ziana more than anyone else. If there's a way to leverage your relationship, we might be able to diffuse this before it escalates. Can you get her to talk? Ilara hesitated, knowing the delicacy of the situation. Ziana is highly controlled, but she did seem genuinely curious about humans. There might be a way to appeal to that curiosity, to show her that conflict isn't the only path. But I'll need access to her, and it'll be risky. Reyes nodded. Do what you need to, but be careful. If she's a key player in whatever's going on, she won't be easy to sway. As Ilara made her way back to Ziana's quarters, she couldn't shake the nagging sense of impending danger. The ambassador's demeanor had shifted dramatically since their first meeting. What had once seemed like diplomatic aloofness now felt more like strategic maneuvering. Ilara needed to find a way past the facade to understand the true motives driving Ziana and the Kilorian mission. The door to Ziana's quarters slid open, and Ilara was greeted by the sight of the ambassador standing by the viewport, gazing out at the stars. The serene expression had returned to her face, but there was an unmistakable tension in her posture. Dr. Voss, Ziana said without turning around. Have you come to accuse me further, or is there another purpose to this visit? Ilara took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. I came because I believe there's more to this than we understand. You spoke of cultural exchange of curiosity, but the data you transmitted suggests something else, something more dangerous. Ziana finally turned to face her, her luminous eyes studying Ilara with an intensity that was both unsettling and inscrutable. You humans are so quick to judge, to fear what you do not understand. The Kilorians have no intention of initiating conflict, but we must prepare for all eventualities. Knowledge is our safeguard. Ilara stepped closer, her voice steady. If that's true, then help us understand. We don't have to be adversaries, Ziana. There's still a chance to salvage this, to build the trust that both our species need. Ziana's gaze softened slightly, but her stance remained guarded. You are different from the others, Dr. Voss. You seek to bridge gaps rather than widen them. But even you must see that not all humans share your perspective. Your species is divided, volatile. We have observed this, and it gives us pause. Ilara nodded, acknowledging the truth in Ziana's words. Humanity has its flaws, but that's why we're here, why the UPA exists. We're trying to move beyond those divisions, to find common ground with species like yours. Ziana's expression wavered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. And yet your own leaders have already labeled me a threat. Even now, you restrict me to this room, treat me as an enemy. Ilara sensed an opening and pressed gently. Prove them wrong, Ziana. Show us that the Kilorians are here in good faith. Help us undo the damage that's been done. Ziana stared at her for a long moment, the silence stretching between them like a taut wire. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. There is a faction within the Kilorian High Council, one that views humanity as a potential threat rather than an ally. They have pushed for more aggressive measures, and my mission was intended to gather intelligence to support that stance. Ilara's heart quickened. This was the confirmation they needed. But you're not fully aligned with them, are you? There's more to your mission than just gathering data. Ziana looked away, her expression conflicted. I was sent to assess, to report, but also to make a case for peace. I have argued for coexistence, but my position is precarious. If the High Council believes that humanity poses too great a risk, they will not hesitate to act. Ilara placed a hand on Ziana's arm, a gesture of solidarity. Then let's make that case together. Help us show your people that cooperation is possible, that we're not the threat they fear. Ziana met her gaze, the luminescence in her eyes dimming slightly. I want to believe you, Dr. Voss. But convincing the High Council will require more than words. They will need proof that humanity can be trusted, that our alliance will not end in betrayal. Ilara nodded, determination settling over her. Then we'll give them that proof, but we have to act quickly, before this spirals out of control. Ziana hesitated, then nodded. Very well. I will cooperate with your efforts, but understand this. The window for diplomacy is closing. If we fail, the consequences will be dire for both our species. Ilara left Ziana's quarters with a renewed sense of purpose, but also a deeper understanding of the stakes at play. The Keylorian mission was not a monolith. It was a fragile alliance of competing interests, with Ziana caught in the middle. To prevent an interstellar war, Ilara would need to navigate this complex web of alliances and enmities, using every ounce of her diplomatic skill to forge a path to peace. Back in the command center, she relayed Ziana's revelations to Captain Reyes and Jackson. The situation was even more precarious than they had anticipated, but with Ziana's cooperation, there was still hope. The team set to work, crafting a plan to expose the aggressive faction within the Keylorian High Council and make a compelling case for peace. As the Resolute powered up its engines and prepared to transmit their findings to UPA Command, Ilara couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. They were standing at the brink of a new chapter in human-Keylorian relations, one that could either end in an unprecedented alliance or plunge both species into a conflict that would echo across the stars. Ilara, Captain Reyes, and Jackson worked tirelessly over the next several hours, formulating a plan that could convince both UPA Command and the Keylorian High Council of the benefits of peace. They drafted a message outlining their findings, highlighting Ziana's cooperation and the danger posed by the more aggressive faction within the Keylorian government. However, as they finalized the transmission, the Resolute's sensors picked up an alarming signal. 3 Keylorian warships had entered the vicinity, their weapons systems powered up and targeting the Resolute. Captain Reyes immediately ordered the ship to battle stations. "They've made their move," he said grimly. "We need to be ready for anything." Ilara's heart pounded as she watched the Keylorian ships maneuver into attack formation. "If they engage, we won't stand a chance against their technology," she warned. Jackson's fingers flew across his console as he activated the Resolute's defensive systems. "We're broadcasting a message of non-aggression, but I'm not sure they're in the mood to listen." Ilara glanced at Ziana's quarters on the display, knowing that the ambassador's involvement was crucial. She tapped her communicator. "Ziana, this is Ilara. We need your help now more than ever. The Keylorian fleet is positioning for an attack." There was a tense pause before Ziana's voice came through, tinged with urgency. "I see them, Dr. Voss. This is a show of force by the faction I warned you about. They are testing your resolve. Can you stop them?" Ilara asked, desperation creeping into her voice. "I will try," Ziana replied, her voice resolute. "But understand, my influence is limited. They are acting out of fear and distrust. I will need to convince them that this confrontation is a mistake." Captain Reyes glanced at Ilara, his expression stern. "We can't afford to wait for them to make the first move. If those ships open fire, we retaliate." Ilara nodded, though the thought of combat with the Keylorians filled her with dread. "Ziana is our best hope. We have to buy her time." Moments later, a communication from the Keylorian flagship crackled over the ship's comms. The voice was cold, commanding, and unmistakably hostile. "This is Commander Lyrak of the Keylorian fleet. Your vessel is in violation of Keylorian space. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded, or you will be destroyed." Captain Reyes responded calmly but firmly. "Commander Lyrak, this is Captain Reyes of the Resolute. We are in neutral space under the jurisdiction of the United Planetary Alliance. Any act of aggression will be considered a declaration of war." The line went silent, and tension hung in the air like a storm cloud about to break. Ilara's eyes darted to the tactical display, showing the Calorian ships inching closer, their weapons still locked on target. Ziana. Ilara whispered under her breath. Please, do something. Just then, the comms crackled again, and this time Ziana's voice cut through. Commander Lyrak, this is Ambassador Ziana. I order you to stand down. The Resolute is under my protection as part of our diplomatic mission. A brief pause followed, and then Lyrak's voice, laced with suspicion. Ambassador Ziana, your authority does not extend to military operations. The High Council has authorized this engagement. Ziana's voice rose, fierce and unyielding. I am the appointed ambassador to this mission, and I carry the will of those who seek peace. If you attack, you will be defying not just our protocols, but the very principles of Calorian honor and diplomacy. I demand an immediate ceasefire. There was a tense moment of silence, and Ilara held her breath, watching the display. Slowly, the icons representing the Calorian ships began to move away, their weapons systems powering down. Ziana had done it, at least for now. Captain Reyes exhaled, relief visible on his face. We're not out of the woods yet, but that bought us some time. Let's get this transmission out and see if we can turn the tide. With the immediate threat averted, the Resolute quickly transmitted the detailed report to UPA Command, including Ziana's revelations about the internal divisions within the Calorian High Council. They proposed a joint diplomatic summit to be held at a neutral location, where representatives from both sides could negotiate a formal treaty. The message was clear. There was still a chance for peace, but it required immediate, decisive action from both governments. Hours passed with no response, and the tension on the bridge of the Resolute was palpable. The crew remained on high alert, knowing that at any moment, the fragile ceasefire could break. Ilara and Ziana continued to collaborate, strategizing ways to appeal to the more moderate members of the Calorian Council. They prepared to make their case at the summit, hoping to sway the undecided and prevent the hardliners from gaining further influence. Then, a priority message came through from UPA Command. The screen lit up with the stern face of Admiral Tuvin, flanked by several high-ranking officials. Captain Rice, Dr. Voss, your report has been received and reviewed. The Council has agreed to the summit proposal. We're sending coordinates now for a secure location where negotiations can begin. Ilara felt a surge of hope, but she knew the hardest part was still ahead. Thank you, Admiral. We'll proceed with Ambassador Ziana and do everything in our power to ensure a peaceful resolution. Stay tuned to be continued. Comment for next part.